I suppose everyone has looked at the minutes. Now I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes unanimously. Thank you. So we are to the resolution to approve the execution of the current agreement with the Gabriel and Roeder and Company. Monte.
Yes.
There you go.
Madam President, members of the board. In 2006, several of our member cities requested that we provide assistance in putting together a coordinated approach to respond to the Government Accounting Standards Board, GASB, Statement 4345, other post-employment benefits. I'm sure you've all read OPEB 4345. It's on the bestseller list. For sleep aid. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we had our subject matter experts from the various cities work with us. We put together an actual services RFP. We published that, and then the representatives actually came up with a recommendation. We brought that to the board, and in 2006, this board awarded a 6-year contract with GRS for that project. In 2012, with anticipation of GASB 4345 being supplemented with a new reporting standard, that was coming up, and so we extended that contract. We brought to the board, we extended that contract for 2 years in contemplation of that. That actually has taken longer. There's been public hearings. They've gone through. So now the effective date of that has been pushed out to beginning in January of 2017. We have, the good news is we have over 100 entities that are participating in this program throughout the state, both cities as well as counties. But they've asked us to extend this contract for another 3 years. And the reason for that is so that we can maintain the consistent approach that we've been able to attain to this point. As well as there was concern that a changeover with 100 entities with the remaining time left on this contract would not be well served for all involved. Just as a background, this is a shared services program. COG holds the master contract with GRS. The participants are then enter into a service agreement with GRS in order to utilize the terms and conditions within that master contract, and then they are also responsible for payment of their costs. GRS has agreed to hold the existing fee structure constant, and so with that, staff would recommend a 3-year extension of the current agreement with GRS to provide OPEB GASB 4345 evaluations. Does that answer any questions?
Well, I see no questions.
Okay.
Move it. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes.
Aye.
Oh. Marty, I think you have an intro too.
This is a resolution accepting the audit report from Weaver & Tidwell for the Texas Department of Transportation, TxDOT, agreed upon procedures audit. Our external auditors, Weaver & Tidwell, they conducted an external audit of our Transportation Department consultant and subgrantee contracts for fiscal years 2011, 12, and 13. This is required as a part of TxDOT's process. They prepared the report, and they have a final report before you. The audit consisted of a financial and non-financial review of the Transportation Department consultant and subgrantee contracts, and they verified that invoices and payments for these contracts were in compliance with the Transportation Department as well as the agency's contract procedures. They did review 11 contracts. They looked for allowable costs, DBE, participation, proper documentation, verification and calculation of overhead rates, allowable profit, travel costs, and also looked at the documentation and review of the final work product prior to the release of retainage. There was We found there was no exceptions found as a result of that audit, and we are asking the board to accept this report, and then this will be distributed to TxDOT as well as other funding agencies as appropriate. Does that answer any questions?
Not seeing any.
Move approval.
Have approval. Second. Have approval and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Pose same sign. Passes unanimously. Thank you. We are down to the resolution to approve the contract with Mission Critical Partners. Christy?
But thanks for being willing to fill in. Good afternoon, board members. I am Christy Williams, and I manage the 911 program. And before you today, we have a resolution requesting approval to contract with Mission Critical Partners for 911 project management services. We have had a contract for the prior year with Mission Critical Partners to provide these services, and they have provided us with an on-site technical project manager. He's done an excellent job. Several of our projects are still ongoing, and we have several more that we're beginning. So we would like to continue these services. But we did want to go out for procurement, so we went through the RFP process, and Mission Critical Partners was the successful candidate. And we have structured the contract, or the proposed contract, to be 1 year's time, again, not knowing how long some of these projects are going to last. We've written in the ability to renew for a second year. So we bring before you the maximum not to exceed $320,000 for the potential of a 2-year contract. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, comments?
Move for approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Pose same sign. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have the resolution authorizing contract with Mascari Corporation for Housing Navigator Services. Doni?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. Agenda item number 5 is a resolution authorizing contract with Mascari Corporation for Housing Navigator Services. And North Central has been receiving funding from the Texas Department of Aging and Disability Services since 2010 to provide housing navigator services, which are intended to increase the supply of affordable, accessible, and integrated housing. And under our contract with the state, the housing navigator is required to develop an inventory of affordable housing, to educate professionals in both the housing and social service arenas about housing and social services, and working with housing developers and encouraging them to increase the stock of affordable housing. We have been contracting with Mascari Corporation since 2010. We've gone through a competitive procurement process every other year. We issued a request for qualifications in June, and the only respondent was Mascari Corporation. Marty Mascari, the principal, has performed well under the terms of the contract, and so we're seeking your authorization to issue him a new contract for fiscal year 2015 with an option to renew for 1 additional year with both parties' consent. Under the terms of the contract, compensation would not exceed $50,000 per annum. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yes.
Go ahead.
So how come there's only one applicant for this? It doesn't pay much, is that the reason?
It requires a pretty diverse skill set and a pretty detailed understanding of both housing programs and social service programs, including Medicaid waiver programs. And so I think we received only one applicant because of the broad skill set that we were seeking and some of the program-related knowledge.
Thank you.
Pay may have had something to do with it as well.
Okay.
Madam President, I have a stupid question.
Go ahead.
the folks that this person would consult with in terms of the training or how do you come across, in other words, to those people? Are you going to have to seek them? Do they call and say, hey, could you use some help?
The Housing Navigator position isn't intended to provide direct services to consumers, but again, to build capacity to conduct an inventory. The way that we've reached our audience is by going through a community mapping process where we have a consultant who has researched all of the different providers within our 14 counties who provide either housing or social services. So we've compiled an email distribution list of 4,000 to 5,000 individuals. And so as we become aware of new programs or sponsored training events, that's our primary mechanism for pushing the information out. Yesterday, our Housing Navigator, in conjunction with the Dallas County and Tarrant County Navigator, held a symposium on Affordable Housing 101 at Grapevine Convention Center, and we had to turn people away. So providers are really hungry for this type of information.
Thank you.
Any others?
What are the measurements, what are the metrics we use? It says developing an inventory of affordable housing, advocating for the expansion of affordable housing, and commenting on housing policy. What are the metrics in this program?
Well, the contract that we have with the state is somewhat unusual in that there are no performance measures per se. We have built in some of our own, and so we've specified that we want to see a minimum number of properties within the housing inventory, that we have certain data sets that we want the person to gather in terms of units that are available to persons with physical disabilities and amenities at the community level. We have established some goals of bringing state programs to the region that are not currently offered, and we've established a goal of identifying at least one new provider to participate in the tenant-based rental assistance program, and the contractor has already met that metric. We've also established some performance goals in terms of identifying and supporting providers for the Amy Young barrier removal program, and he's found, I believe, 3 to date. So we've tried to weave in those performance metrics when we can, keeping in mind that when it comes to commenting on policy, it's a little bit more difficult. He makes a point to attend all of the meetings that he becomes aware of in terms of community development block grant applications. So, great question. I'm not sure we've got it down to an exact science, but we've inserted metrics where we can.
Doni, describe what the overarching goal of this program is, both from the aging and from the mental and physical.
The goal initially was to serve a very targeted population consisting of older persons and persons with disabilities who are in institutional settings, primarily nursing homes, and have the capacity to return to the community but lack housing. And so this is actually funded through the Money Follows the Person campaign, which was a response to the Olmstead Supreme Court decision. And again, the goal initially was to identify primarily apartments that would be available to nursing home residents who are receiving Medicaid benefits, very, very low incomes, no more than $2,130 a month, but our average consumer has a monthly income of about $800 or $900. We realized, and the state and federal government realized as well, that there's a much broader population that requires affordable housing. It's not just institutionalized folks only. And so the work products have been made available to folks both in the community as well as in institutional settings who are in danger of losing housing and becoming institutionalized because of housing issues.
It's keeping the nursing homes, and of course the state is also getting rid of a lot of their facilities that are encouraging community-based housing of people and care for people. So this all fits into that situation, and we believe, and it's pretty well proved, that it's a lot less expensive to house them in this situation than it would be in a nursing home or some other similar.
About 25% of the cost to provide services in the community.
So, that is already meeting that demand as much as we can and really trying to create the opportunity
Because there are not enough low-income facilities. They're too expensive.
Yeah,
So, I
and
can
most
see-
of the housing authorities have wait lists of 1 year and longer.
Okay. Any other did you have a comment? Oh, you had your picture?
Oh, it's on the side, no.
You got it. I don't see any other lights. So, okay, we have a motion. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, passes unanimously. We are, I think you're still here, Doni.
Agenda item is number 6 is a resolution authorizing contract with Senior Source for money management services. And for the past 15 years, we have chosen to fund money management services, which are made available to people who are at least 60 years of age and who live in just a few of our counties. We would love to take it region-wide, but have not found a provider in the counties other than Collin, Denton, and Rockwall. Through the money management program, bonded and insured personnel provide either bill payer services to consumers or representative payee services to those who are more impaired. The program does serve people with low income and limited resources, and we believe it's really critical in terms of helping people who are having difficulty meeting their basic needs and who are having difficulty managing their personal finances, either because of lack of experience or low vision or cognitive impairment. So we have gone out for bids every other year for money management services. And since we started going out for bid in 2001, we've only had one competing proposal. The Senior Source currently holds the contract, was the only respondent when we engaged in competitive procurement in June. And so we're seeking your authorization to extend a new contract to the Senior Source for money management services, 1-year contract with the option to renew for up to 3 additional years, and at a cost not to exceed $38,580 during fiscal year 2015. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about it.
What do we get for our $38,000? That's not a lot of money. What do we get?
It's not a lot of money, but the Senior Source is a very efficient organization that relies quite a bit on well-vetted, trained, supported volunteers. They have the ability to serve up to 70 or 80 consumers. Currently, they have excess capacity. There are a lot of people who can benefit from the program. It is voluntary. And a lot of folks who are having difficulty are not always comfortable with having other folks make recommendations to them. But it is a very efficient program and again, very vital in terms of supporting people in the community.
I'm just interested, there are only 3 counties that have it. How do you let everybody know about this service? I'm sure there are other places it could be utilized.
Mm-hmm. And those are not the only counties where it is available. They're the only counties within the aging region. Senior Source has a very robust program for Dallas County residents. Tarrant County has a very robust money management program through a local guardianship agency. But it's basically the same kind of outreach strategy. Most of our referrals do come from professionals. And so we rely on that Aging and Disability Resource Center listserv that I referenced. A lot of presentations, a lot of brochures, health fairs, word of mouth, very closely coordinated with the home delivered meal program. And a lot of times those volunteers will alert senior source that there's an issue.
Yeah.
A stack of unopened bills is kind of a red flag.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, well, I was going to add a comment, you know,
Okay.
they have a very big presence in Richardson, and, you know, our inspectors are huge referrals, so, you know, when folks are out checking meters and things like that, and we have a very large senior citizen population, percentage-wise, and so it really is, I mean, the city does a lot of referring into the program, most of our agencies do a lot of referring into the program, so churches, places of worship, so they are very well plugged in to the social service, at least in our
Sounds
world.
like a good program.
It really is.
Good. Any other comments or questions? Motion?
Move for approval.
A motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Pose same sign. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the information. Mr. Morris?
Madam President, members of the board, it's very nice to see you. Item 7 on your agenda is an action item. This is a very intriguing, innovative partnership that the Regional Transportation Council has. Chris Klaus is going to do the heavy lifting in putting the speed limits back to where they were previously when they were lowered by 5 miles an hour for air quality reasons. All of those facilities are outside of 820 and outside the LBJ loop. There's some small increase in emissions. So we're asking Natalie Becker and our staff to reach out and improve traffic signals within the region. So the benefit to the folks outside is you get a significant increase in your speed limit. It's being offset by improvement in traffic signals in the central part of the region. Those traffic signals, local matches through transportation development credits. So we have found an innovative way to use those particular credits in this particular case. We're not going to use all 600 traffic signals to offset the higher emissions. So we're starting to get some emission credit surplus that we can use in our air quality conformity analysis to continue to show the federal government that our collection of transportation projects leads to lower emissions on all the things that you are doing. One element on the bottom that talks about local match, you said, well, these are transportation development credits, but you mentioned state and local match. This is the third initiative, traffic signals. This is probably the most cost-effective thing we can do in transportation, is to continue to update the traffic signal patterns. A traffic signal pattern is good for about 4 or 5 years, and it needs to be checked as the transportation demand changes. So we're proposing 2 contractors, and because we haven't finished the phase 2 signal work, we want to be able to not hold up any local government's wish to get hold of these consultants by going to these pools of consultants as well to work on either phase 2 or phase 3. These projects will not proceed until all of the match requirements are in, and that largely, obviously, is in the second category of projects where locals had to put in a local match. We will bring back in probably 2 months the 4th traffic signal program, which is when there's incidents and accidents on freeways, we're going to turn and increase the green time on the frontage roads. So where are there continuous frontage roads? Where are there major incidents? There was a horrible fatality in, I believe it was in Richardson County. The freeway was shut down for a long period of time. We want to go in and change those green times along the frontage roads and reduce upstream accidents as a result. So we're reaching out to partners in what will be the 4th initiative that we'll bring back in a few months. So it's gone through a competitive procurement. As you know, I don't sit on the selection committee for these contractors. Technical staff from around the region sits on these and recommends the 2 companies. These 2 companies have a very strong history of traffic engineering work in the region, and you probably use them in your work that you do. So Kimley-Horn and HDR, each for $1.4 million, are going to continue the signal timing program in the region for safety, mobility, and air quality reasons. And in this case, to offset any emissions from when we increase our speed limits, when they were lowered for environmental purposes. By doing this, this turns the responsibility for these speeds back over to TxDOT. So TxDOT will do the 85th percentile, and in some quarters, the speed limit may go up more than 5 miles an hour. But the 85th percentile is the safest place you could place the speed limits. As you've heard me say before, the safest speed on the freeway is the one where all the vehicles are going the same speed. And I would anticipate in some of these quarters, this will improve. Vehicle technology has changed. There is no increase in emissions or significant increase at higher speed. The vehicle technology is far superior now than when this was originally proposed. And I think it's a nice program the Regional Transportation Council has. And they're asking you to be able to hire these contractors to implement this program. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
I think it's a good program. Anyone else have some?
Michael, I know it doesn't pertain to this particular resolution, but in TxDOT and reviewing the speed limits along the interstate, we found, I know we talked to the RTC about that there were some segments that the speed was set a little bit more based on revenue, anticipated revenue than what the speed should be. Have we gone back and TxDOT kind of?
So they have gone back. I suggested that they don't do the speed during the weekday, where the commuters know that cities are putting up speed traps. It's the nicest way I can say it. It's been a long week. I could have probably worked on that a little bit.
Where revenue was a priority
for revenue purposes. And you as elected officials have said, well, gee, we should be focused on the customer and don't have artificial change in speed. And I think taking the speeds on the weekend, where the traveler is traveling the road and not necessarily the knowledge of what is there, I think it has shown that the geometrics of the road would lead to a higher speed. And I've also asked TxDOT you can go out as often as you want, and just because you go out one time doesn't mean you can't go out again. So the RTC has requested these speeds should transition as the roadway increases in either age or ramps. So speeds downtown are often relatively slow because you have lots of things going on. And as you get out to brand new roads and infrequent ramps, those speeds should be approaching 75 miles an hour. And TxDOT is implementing RTC's wishes with regard to collecting data to eliminate revenue-producing components instead of speed-sensitive safety elements.
Any other comments?
Move approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Pose same sign. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Morris, I don't believe you're still there.
We have some revisions to the work plan, and Dan Kessler and Vicki Alexander do those for us, so Dan will work that out.
Thank you, Michael. Madam Chair, members of the board. Just as a way of a brief reminder, you will recall that our Unified Planning Work Program is our scope of services that the Metropolitan Planning Organization performs over a 2-year period. You serve as the fiscal agent to the Metropolitan Planning Organization in partnership with the Regional Transportation Council. This is a 2-year plan. We are about approaching the end of the first fiscal year. And so we're bringing you a series of modifications to that document. The programmatic changes and proposals have been run through the public involvement process, our technical committee, and Regional Transportation Council. So always our last stop through this process is at the executive board to get your endorsement and approval. It is a lengthy item. There are 3 pieces of material in your packet. I want to compliment Vicki and Mercer, our staff, that worked very hard on this. The first for you is we provided you as a summary of these changes in a sort of a narrative format that we think makes it easy to understand. The second part of your document is a lengthy actual portion of the document that will be inserted into the Unified Planning Work Program upon your approval, and all the various state and federal agencies that are involved, so we've actually provided you the exact document that will be used. And then finally, we have a resolution for your approval in order to move these forward. The first time I presented this at public meeting, it took me 20 minutes to wander through, and Michael elbowed me and said that was way too long. So I got it down to 10 minutes. I presented to Judge Hill at the public meeting. I got this to 10 minutes, so I'm aspiring today to get this down to 5 minutes. So let's see if I haven't, with some help, gotten some help here to get us through this quickly. So this is the important part of this presentation, and part of this makes your job relatively easy. There are actually a little over $4 million and $4,079,000 of modifications that we're making to our work program. To give you some reminder of scope, our work program generally is in about the $80 million range, so it gives you some perspective of what we're doing. But these are all significant changes. The important part to note here, though, is other than $75,000 of these, a little over $4 million of these you have already approved in individual items. And you would say, well, Dan, why would that be the circumstance? Well, it's been our practice always, we've tried to bring before the board any opportunities that we are moving forward in the way of grant applications prior to receiving those funds. And so each of those items that I won't list there, but beginning with travel models and air quality technology, State Highway 199, all of those projects Michael or myself or staff have presented to you most likely over the last 6 months. We are now just going through the formal process of once you've approved it, and we've gotten the actual funding from either through the RTC process or through the state and federal agencies, we're then required to go back and log those in the work program. The only new revenue we're talking about in this proposal is an actual additional programming of $75,000 to a project that we're pursuing through the University of Texas. DSTOP is a program that's an acronym that really looks at data focused on real-time data that we can collect off of our freeway and interstate system that can be used in the planning and operations. UT has a center that's been formed that's got some very progressive work. I think we think is a very cost-effective proposal for us to be involved in with the University of Texas to take advantage of a lot of new technology and data collection methodologies. And we flagged for you that $75,000 is actually coming out of a balance of available carryover or planning funds that we have available in the work program that we're programming. There's one slight revenue change in our climate change vulnerability assessment project, which Michael will brief you on following the item 9. We're reorganizing some dollars to show RTC participation in local dollars. And then the final thing I want to mention, and this will come back to you, but the Regional Transportation Council has been briefed. We're very excited about this. Michael has worked hard with TxDOT over the last probably 2 years, and our staff to get to a place where TxDOT recognizes the challenges that we are having in moving programs towards operations. In that, as you recall, state and federal grants are all based on a cost reimbursement basis. And when you get into programs like Michael just mentioned, traffic signals and Natalie's programs, projects that can involve invoices of $300,000 to $400,000 a month, and we're spending a lot of money. You know, the Council of Governments is not a taxing agency. We don't have revenue sources outside of our grant. And so what TxDOT has agreed to put in place for 3 metropolitan areas across the state, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, and Houston, I think we will use this. I'm not sure about the other metropolitan areas, is basically what we're calling a $10 million revolving fund. It's not actually new revenue. It's just funds that come in. They stay in Monte's accounts. It allows us to pay those outgoing expenses to contractors and consultants and allow us to have those funds in place to pay them and then recover those funds as a revolver. So basically funds go out and funds come back in. The account will always circle around a $10 million fund with whatever interest that administration is able to collect. We have worked through all of the what I call policy sides of this issue. Ken, our attorney, is finalizing the details, and this actual details of how this fund will operate will come back to the board for your approval this fall, but we are noting it in the Unified Planning Work Program.
It's essentially a cash flow situation for us, so it's really, really good with Michael. state and all the other NPOs have been able to reach this accommodation.
The remaining modifications, and I tried to summarize these for you, are what we call text updates. You've heard Lucille's talked about the agency's economic development district program. We're documenting that we stand ready and able to help with that. We are going to amend our metropolitan transportation plan this fall. So we're adding text to our work program that allows us to do it. There's some additional corridors that local governments, text dots, and counties have flagged for us that they need additional technical assistance on. We're adding those to that work. We're very excited about an initiative that is needed, that Judge Whitley is leading, to really look at western Tarrant County, and I would actually say western side of the metropolitan area, because this includes, in addition to Tarrant County, we're looking at Parker, Johnson, Wise, really look at long-term thoroughfare planning and how we make some of those critical connections in the western part of our region. And then from time to time, and this is something the federal government expects us to do as part of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, we flag those opportunities in the Unified Planning Work Program where we think we can help with other economic development initiatives. There are some text updates that we're flagging. Michael's already spoken about transportation development credits. There's some places where we provide clarification on funding and expansion of work scopes or products. And again, we've listed all of those for you in excruciating detail in the document. This is the process we've gone through. We go through public meetings. This has been approved by us, the Surface Transportation Technical Committee and the Regional Transportation Council. And with that, we're asking for your approval today, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
If I could just add one item. We're asking you to approve the $10 million revolver in the Unified Planning Work Program. But we are going to bring you back the implementation details of that revolver. For example, I think we should be able to keep the interest. I'm sure that's going to be heavily debated in the negotiations. But basically what this does, if you have a federal grant in your community, and it's a cost reimbursement grant, you are paying that bill with local money. And you're paying that contractor or that road or that signal or whatever you're doing in your city, and then you're sending reimbursement request to the state or the federal government. So you first pay it with your own money, and then you're reimbursed. Well, our agency doesn't have $10 million in cash flow, and transportation is often being asked to take on lots of programs like the traffic signal program Dan mentioned. So this will be $10 million in cash. So the cash will be there in cash, but it isn't to be spent for other than cost reimbursement. So it always has a value of $10 million in it. So when someone audits, which will be in our request, someone will say, oh, there's $6 million in that account, and $4 million has just been paid in bills, and we're waiting $4 million payments back from the federal government. So it is a major breakthrough. I think it's been 6 years in convincing the state to do it. Your question should be, well, how have you done this in the past? We traded federal funds for local funds. The term was RTC local. But the RTC local always has been specified for a particular transportation project. So in the beginning, there was revenues, but as we implement all of our projects, RTC local by definition goes to zero because it's to implement all the projects, and we desperately have needed a revolver. So Monte every 3 months is asking me, when do you get into your revolver? And the RTC has approved it, the commission has approved it, so we just have to give you the fiduciary terms of the particular deal as our fiduciary agent, and you will be the keepers of the $10 million. We will have to negotiate those terms with the state. I assume it'll come in over time. For example, they'll give us $1 million, and then 3, and then 4, and then 7. It might take a year to get to the 10 million, but we're not asking you to approve those details, just to approve us to put it in the work plan so we can bring you back the details of that revolver program.
I would add a project, for example, that we're doing that's stressed the system. We were the actual federal grantee for the Dallas streetcar project. It's a $42 million project with about $25 million in federal funds, and we get bills every month for over $1 million. So that's an example of those big projects that are coming through the system that are stressing the system.
Sounds good. Sounds like that's progress. We've been needing to do it, so good. Are there any comments? Okay.
I think it's marvelous.
I do too.
And I think we ought to get to keep the interest.
Yeah, we'll try.
You are?
Exactly.
I think we should get to keep the interest.
Oh, yeah, well,
We're gonna try. We're
Do we?
definitely interested in keeping the interest.
Well, he's negotiating it, but I think we should get to keep it. I don't think Ms. Rose and them should get it.
okay. I'll leave that to you to know.
Madam President, I move to approve, but also at the same time, I wanted to commend your staff.
Yes.
Previous week, they did a workshop on the funding, kind of did a 30,000-foot view and dialed it down. I'll tell you, I brought some folks from our area, and it was extremely informational, and they did a wonderful job. And I really want to appreciate their work and their efforts in that. So, again, that goes along with my motion to approve.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Larry, did you have a comment on something like that? No? Okay.
No, I said one question about the interest you're talking about. So is the interest on 10 or is the interest on what you have left?
We'll have it, all we have earned is what we have.
The interest will be on whatever's in the account as it revolves, so some months it might be $1 million or $2 million, and other months it hopefully is 7 or 8, so.
Oh, okay.
But it's a permanent revolver, so, over a 10-year period, it probably doesn't amount to something right now, but over time, who knows what that interest rate may be.
That's true. Well, I too applaud you, and this staff is always innovative and out in front, so I think it's wonderful. We have a motion and a second, so I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Pose same sign. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank
That's
you.
why we're
Thanks for your time.
following Fed policy so closely to see when they're gonna turn up the interest rate rises.
Okay, Mr. Morris.
Madam President, thank you very much. 7 of you spent a lot of yesterday and today at the Texas Transportation Commission meeting in Dallas, and I thank you very much for all of your time. I think it's an amazing story being told to TxDOT, and you've all worked very hard in those accomplishments, and I very much appreciate you taking the time to be there. Item 9 is a slight adjustment to a project we already have. We've reached out to, are there any interested parties within the region that want to address what is called the mitigation elements or vulnerability elements with regard to temperature and rain changes that may be occurring. In the second paragraph, you have UTA, City of Dallas, Fort Worth Transportation Authority said yes. We have discovered, and you've probably noticed it as you drive around the region, the roadways are getting out here wavy due to changing soil conditions. Several folks across the country are doing similar activities, and we determined we need to put more effort into that. So we asked one of our participants, UTA, for engineering assistance with regard to what should we do different under the ballast of railroad tracks and or roadways as temperatures change and rain patterns change, to see if there's anything we should do with regard to soil stabilization or other things as we build projects. This isn't an issue of is there climate change or not. It has nothing to do with that. It's whatever's occurring, how do we on the engineering side do a better job? And that's what our partners are interested in. So we are requesting to add $25,000 in effort to this particular project. All the sponsors stay the same, all the participants stay the same. We're going to ask UTA to perform that particular work. If not, we think we can get that information from others that are performing similar work and make sure we get it integrated in our results from the people that participated in this particular item. So the resolution is there for you to adjust it. $12,500 from federal highway grant funds and $12,500 from federal highway grant funds and $12,500 from RTC local. That's that local fund I told you is eventually going to go to 0. So I'll stop there and take any questions on any of these.
So you've already negotiated with UTA?
We're in discussions with them.
You're in discussion.
It'll be this dollar amount or less.
Okay. Good. Larry?
So one of the more extreme changes is we all want concrete highways that last longer. It always seems to be the concrete that buckles, and we've had this going on forever. It doesn't seem to change. We still get buckling in the concrete sections. Are they gonna look into something like that? Or-
Yes. Should we have more asphalt sections? We're proposing more asphalt sections on the roadway. Should we provide asphalt as stabilization underneath concrete pavements? You don't, same with your house, you don't want things to penetrate under. I think there's been some errors where certain stabilization materials, like lime stabilization, was used when it shouldn't have been used, given the type of soil that was there. There's some very elastic soil that starts in North Irving. If you're over where the Cowboys practice, comes across Irving, Interstate 20 between Grand Prairie and Dallas, there's stretches of certain clays and other materials. And the same thing is true with water. You know, we're raising the bridges across the Trinity River on the Horseshoe to get more conveyance. So when we're building bridges, this lets the city of Dallas raise the levee eventually. So where we're building structures, the levee is being raised. So we're providing for greater contingencies due to vulnerability over time. I worry about the heat of workers. And I think there's a market of what are the materials that workers should be using as they work in hotter temperatures. We're already moving a lot of our construction tonight because we don't want construction trucks in the peak periods. But sometimes we're in neighborhoods, and if you followed our work on LBJ, sometimes the neighborhoods don't like the work we're trying to do at night. So all of these are the type of issues we've reached out to our partners to try to get some direction. And any other questions?
Ian? Okay. Have your motion?
Move approval.
Have a motion? And a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Pose same sign. Thank you. Mr. Morris?
The last item I have for you is an action item. Judge Councilmember Hill asked us at the RTC to consider submitting some comments to their record. She is the transportation chair of the city of Dallas. Our RTC chairman has sent in comments. We as staff are sending in comments. She's asked if this board wishes to send in comments. She knows this board has approved studies and things that may help her. So you have, I thought best as a staff person, to do this in the form of a letter, not in a resolution. So it did not appear that the executive board was providing sort of top-down direction versus a letter to the record in their structure as the city secretary's office. While you're reconsidering your for-hire taxi ordinance, would you consider these three elements that is available to you? So you as a board have hired Lee Fisher at our request to look at the best practices across the country for services and technology. This is Uber and other types of things, so we learn what others are doing to get the best technology transfer quickly. The Regional Transportation Council has us working on for-hire services for close to 5 years. This is the most complicated set of policies I've ever worked on, but we're 95% done, and city attorneys are now meeting across the region working on final ordinances, and transportation staff is working on the technical details on Jesse's team. And the RTC is very interested in responding to the famous story of the Euless cancer victim going to the Arlington Cancer Treatment, and that taxi could take that person there, but that taxi couldn't take that person back, and how that person had to wait hours to return. And the RTC is interested in seamless services, obviously, within the region. And also, for air quality purposes, don't have the taxis spend half their time with no passengers. It's very common for them all to return back to the airports, when if you have a supply and demand technology out there called dispatching, you wouldn't need to have all these deadhead miles and all these emissions and everything's part of the process. So it's a simple request by the judge. Would the board wish to weigh in? And staff has drafted a letter for your consideration. There's a companion one from the RTC, and staff is submitting at her request technical things that the city may wish to use or not as they consider their ordinance. And I'll
I
start with that.
recommend that we do this, particularly since the chair has asked them to do so, but it really is important to allow our cities at their own determination to make the decision, but they have all the information available to them to make a wise decision that's coordinated if possible.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did make this request at RTC, and I would like to see this item passed. I don't know of another mechanism for this body to formally engage in the city of Dallas's discussion. There is value to this body's doing that, and the two proposals, our proposal and the original proposal, I think should be coordinated. But that there has to be some communication mechanism. The COG has to ask us to allow you to come in. There's not a way to just barge in. And so this says, allow us into the conversation. And I think then I have the material that I need to say to my council, please don't act without considering what the COG is doing. Let's do that in conjunction. Having said that, I'm not sure I'm the right person to move to approve, and I won't, but please know that, but I think this is a good idea. Thank you.
I think it's a good idea too. And thank you for asking and for leading this issue. I appreciate that. And we have a motion. Judge?
May I ask a question? This technology, Michael, and this dispatch service, we've read in the media the efforts of Uber. Are we getting in the middle of free market here?
Well, our staff's position is you have to create an opportunity for technology in the free market to participate. The regional program is putting something together to do so. Now, the mechanics of how you do that, and this is why this gets so complicated, is where cities are spending a lot of time with regard to, do they have insurance or not? The famous Uber case that I think is driving a lot of this particular discussion is at the time Uber had insurance once the patron got into the cab, but Uber vehicle had a major fatality on the way of responding to the particular person. And that's one of hundreds of details one has to put into a particular audit. So the regional program is making room for all technologies, and so is the Dallas program. I think we'll see what our consultants come up with on how the rest of the country is doing it. And I'm a big believer in technology transfer, and there may be dozens of ways in which this is done. But I think everyone wants the private sector market to drive this. But you are in a regulated industry when it comes to a taxi cab, because a taxi cab is an extension of the public transit system. So how you weave them in is what makes this really hard.
One other question, how does this tie into our transit agencies, particularly TAPS in my case, because I've heard cases where the taxi can take it out to a certain distance, but then has to take TAPS back in. So the seamless, is it eventually going to solve that?
This is the problem the regional program is exactly trying to hit, where they maybe have a license in Plano or Allen, and they take the person to McKinney, but they don't have a license in McKinney, and the person gets stranded. The regional program is trying to take care of that. So what I think the council member is trying to do is that may not be the city of Dallas's #1 issue, But if it's the regional's number one issue, she wants to make sure that that item gets integrated into whatever they do, so Dallas doesn't do something just for Dallas, when there was a missed opportunity that we could do something that Dallas is interested in and also solve the regional problem.
Any others? Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Who said it? The judge made the motion. Mayor made the second. Okay, all right. All right, all in favor? Pose same sign.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are down to item 11 and Edith Marvin.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. Every few years, our department brings to you some regional amendments that we put together for addressing the suite of adopted international codes. The latest whole suite came out in 2012, and our region put together amendments to go with that suite. The next suite of codes will be coming out in 2015, and very soon our group will be working with our various advisory boards to come up with some regional amendments to that suite of international codes. Today we're seeking endorsement of the 2014 National Electrical Code, which is a little out of sync with the other suite of codes. But we bring in individually. The last NEC, the National Electrical Code, was 2011. And what we're bringing to you today is a 2014 regional amendments to that code. I was happy to come in and see Paul Ward. He's the building official from South Lake, also our chair of the Electrical Advisory Board, sitting with Sandra, who put together most of the meetings that were, many meetings that were used to come up with these regional amendments. So thank you for being here. Moving forward, again, the latest edition of the National Electrical Code was 2011. The current edition and what we're proposed regional amendments for is the 2014 edition. The amendments were put together by the Electrical Advisory Board and then endorsed by the Regional Codes Coordinating Council on August 12, 2014. The regional amendments for the code were accompanied by a position paper, and there's kind of a definition. It's a collection of opinions representing different perspectives on a code issue. That position paper is included along with the regional amendments in your packet as attachment 1 and then followed by attachment 2. A summary of the information provided to you in attachment 1 is basically the regional amendments included adding clarifying language and subparts to some articles, deleting some articles, adding and amending some definitions for clarification. A reason for change to several articles were provided for information for those building officials that are reading these regional amendments to help them better understand what we're trying to do. Informational notes were provided and exceptions were provided. So today we're seeking with item 11 your endorsement of the 2014 National Electrical Code regional amendments as well as the position paper that was endorsed by the Electrical Advisory Board.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor?
Let me ask you a question. These, it's been too many years and I've slept too many times. These still are not applicable in the unincorporated areas because I don't believe the state legislature has given us authority to basically mandate these construction codes in the unincorporated areas. Correct? Still correct. Hold on, I'll bring that up with our legislator.
I believe that home rule cities can send out
They can do their ETJ.
to their ETJ and do it in those counties.
But we cannot do it within our unincorporated area. And while most of Tarrant County unincorporated is in somebody's ETJ, there's a number of counties where, and I think everybody always thinks that we have the authority to do that, and we do not.
The judge brings up a good point, though, that we probably ought to get our legislators on, because the cities are sending their permitting out into the ETJ, which is causing problems between the inspection and the permitting, and counties are rolling.
We, I know, I'm just saying, you won't have any reluctance on the part of cities to endorse whatever you can get. I don't think probably.
On the, in terms of required permits in the ETJ, though, isn't that limited to a certain number of feet? I don't think that, Judge, I don't think that includes the entire ETJ.
There is a recent appeals court ruling that they are, let me see, I will phrase this, the cities are extrapolating, I do believe.
Okay.
There's some questions.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second on the floor, so I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and Edith, I believe you got out of prayer.
We do. A couple months ago in June, we brought to this board an item that was for approval of the majority of the funding mechanisms that support our department's operations. One of those items was for a partnership with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and was anticipated, the funding anticipated was around $350,000 per year. The good news for us is that since that time, we have worked with FEMA, and they have revealed that we have a need for additional funds and have requested additional work from us. And so our request for you today is an increased approval for the $350,000 per year that you approved in June. Just a quick history and background on this program that is held within our department. We have assisted local governments with floodplain management and watershed planning for many years. Our Public Works Council has assisted in the work program with this effort. Our partnership has been with the state and federal agencies, FEMA Region 6, as well as the Texas Water Development Board, and we were named a cooperative technical partner in 2002. So 2002, we were named CTP. In 2009, we worked on a Upper Trinity Basin mapping needs assessment with our various communities to come up with some priorities. We went through a discovery effort where we went out to the region and talked with your different floodplain administrators about their needs in particular in areas where they were having difficulties and problems associated with flooding as a major category. So in 2015, we worked with the communities of Kennedale, Arlington, and Tarrant County to work on the Village Creek watershed. That we're wrapping up our efforts on that, and we're very pleased. The communities are very pleased with what we've produced on that. But we happen to have a new effort that's been requested of us since June to work with the communities of Colleyville and South Lake on a Bear Creek watershed in Tarrant County. This map shows you kind of the Elm Fork, the Lower West Fork that we did discovery on, and then one of the FEMA's agents did the efforts on the Upper Trinity, which is that lower segment. I should be using my mouse in this area. So some of the reasons are listed here for why Bear Creek was next on the list of priorities and why FEMA has chosen to move forward with those. There's storm events that have threatened them. There's a lot of flood insurance policies that have been collected. So we've worked with Colleyville and South Lake. They've actually requested to exceed the 25% match. FEMA, in these cases, FEMA will contribute 75% of the dollars needed for the study effort. The communities typically match that with 25% of the funds. These two communities have actually requested that the limits of the study be increased to benefit them more. And so their percentage has gone up a little bit on the match because they've asked for above and beyond what FEMA's willing to do. So under this scenario, FEMA's portion would be $503,000. South Lake and Colleyville would contribute $444,000. So what we're here for today is to request that you increase the amount that we requested in June under item, I believe it was item 6, to increase our funding approval from $350,000 per year to $1 million per year. because it seems like FEMA is going to be asking for more and more from us every year, which is a great problem to have.
Okay.
What funds will be used for this increase?
I'm sorry?
What funds will be used for this increase?
These funds, 75%, what would be 75% will come from FEMA. So 503,000 FEMA is providing the funds, and then the local match plus some is being provided by the cities of South Lake and the cities of Colleyville. And in addition to that, there's FEMA's asked us to do some administrative support for them for $15,000.
I just have one comment. You're always trying to tell people they need to be covered by flood insurance if they're in a risk area. But what was that I read? That 29% occurrence of a flood, if you live in a risk area, is going to happen, that you're going to be flooded, 29% risk. It needs to be publicized more since they've gathered that information. So it's not just once in 100 years or something like that, but
No, it's not.
it's almost 30% of the time you're going to be flooded.
Yes, and another complicating factor is a lot of communities rely upon the FEMA maps, and that's why we promote higher standards. Is the FEMA maps are based on, they're an insurance program, and so their function is to provide insurance for structures, but their flood data is typically around 25 years out of date, and they use the existing conditions at that time. So a lot of development has happened in our region in 25, 30 years. So we definitely, encourage, and our communities encourage higher standards to consider floods or stormwaters that have potential floods of the real 100 years with the community developed out in its built-out condition. So again, our request, this request is for the budget approval. We'll be coming back to you with this item. Our next step will be to put out a request for proposal to select a consultant to perform this study for Colleyville and South Lake, and then we'll bring an item to request that proposal and then bring it back to you once we're ready to accept that.
Good. We've experienced that the maps are really outdated. Way outdated. Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We finished item 12.
This was a great segue into the budget discussion, primarily for Mayor Wheat. Our budget that we present to you is much unlike what you do with the city or the school, in that you set your tax rates and pretty well finance your expenditures and you stick within that during the year. Here, we say this is a great snapshot of what's happening today, but we don't know when FEMA or some city may come to us during the year and say, we want to increase something, or whether we want you to do something in addition to what we've asked you to do. We always bring that back to the board. Increasing staff, we bring that back. But essentially, we're amending our budget throughout the year based on our grantor agencies and our membership asking us to do this. The other thing I just read, the city block, unimproved. Once you pave over it, put rooftops, you get about 5 times more runoff than what you had before. So as we develop more and more, that's why we're seeing these FEMA cups, and our flooding really intensifies as we go into the future.
All right. Well, this is the most exciting part. I know y'all been waiting with anticipation for this budget. Of course, y'all don't have budget presentations at your own NTC, so you've been waiting for this.
Thank you, Monte.
I do have some good news, or potentially good news, is that we have actually reviewed this with Dan Mascari, that's the chairman of the Finance Committee, as well as Judge Hill and Judge Self. They put us through our paces. They asked many, many questions, and we were able to hopefully successfully answer all those. So I have a 10-minute version, and I have an hour version. And so I'll let you tell me,
Well, you know we want the hour.
What's that?
I said, you know this group wants the hour.
Oh, you bet, you bet. So I was thinking about this presentation. I thought, well, I think I'll share this, is that we have plans in this organization. We always have a plan for everything. And so, in the words of Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get hit. And whenever I related that with the committee, I was also reminded by Judge Self that Patton said that everybody has a plan until the bullets start flying. And as Mike related, we have a plan, but our plan changes, and it changes quite often. And that's really the thing that we want to relate today, is that this is a snapshot, this is a point in time of how our budget is, but our budget is going to change. Just a few quick notes is that within this budget, this is basically made up of contracts with our various funding agencies, federal and state agencies. There's a statement of work, and that guides what we're going to do and how we're going to do that. But there's a lot of interdependency that we do within this agency because we have limited funds, and so we look for opportunities to share our resources and to make our resources go further. So, our funding sources. You've had this, our total revenues for 2017, we're not to 2017 yet, but for 2014 was $177,382,000. We're going to $173,163,000. That's a reduction of $4,218,000. $1 million of that is in state and federal revenues, and we'll go over a little bit more detail with that in just a minute. But then also our local contracts, grants, in-kind match, adjusted by some $4 million. But as I say, the devil's in the details. If you look here in our state and federal grants, of our state grants, of the $1.9 million decrease, we had a $2.5 million increase to TxDOT, was the transportation funded. DADS went up another $800,000. CSEC, the communication, the Commission on State Emergency Communications, went down $4 million, and then DPS went down $780,000. In our state, Federal Transit Authority went up $1.585 million. The Department of Energy went down some $700,000. Then the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, went down $437,000. The FHA, Federal Highway Administration, went up $385,000. And then the FEMA went up $479,000. And that caused a total net decrease of $1 million. But this is different somewhat than your regular budgets, because what this does is, what we're going to reflect here is programmatically what are those changes and what occurred. So for the $1.1 million decrease in state and federal funding, transportation changed by some $3 million, and that increase was TxDOT, which we looked at earlier, $2.56 million, the FTA, $1.58 million, and then the Department of Energy going down $700,000, and then the FAA going down $400,000. Workforce, it's changed by some $750,000. Federal revenues went down $400,000 in DOL, and then the Texas Workforce Commission out of Austin is a reduction of some $352,000. Within community services, we have a $3.4 million decrease. Your big hitter there is the Commission on State and Emergency Communications, $4 million decrease right there. So, let you know what that is. 911 gets their funding on a biennial basis. So, they had 2014 and 2015 to spend those funds. Rather than wait until the last minute, we did all of our capital expenditures as well as some of our network improvements. We went ahead and did those in 2014 so that we wouldn't run up against the bar on that. So that's the major change in that area. In E&D, we had the FEMA increase to some $479,000, which is the amount that Edith was talking about earlier. Then the TCEQ had an increase there of some $199,000. Emergency preparedness, you're seeing a $577,000 decrease. and that's in Texas DPS SAA. So that's the changes in the revenues, and then that flows into local contracts and in kind. Transportation had a $3.4 million decrease. $875,000 of that was due to the swap of the dollars for the TDC, which is the Transportation Development Credits, which Mike was talking about earlier. We've had the completion or close to completion of some sustainable development projects of some $5.1 million, as well as a BACPED program of $1.3 million. But then we had, as a reduction, but then we had a local contract increase for Dallas Streetcar for the dart match of some $3.8 million. So that all nets out to about $3.4 million. An in-kind match, you got a $1.4 million increase. That's primarily due to the Safe Room Program. There you go, Safe Room Program. And then aging, $957,000 increase, and that's due to our match, our in-kind match for our programs there. There's no more dollars going in that's required for our counties. And then transportation has a $1.6 million increase. $670,000 of that is due to, again, the swap for the TDC, and then we had other completed projects, the sustainable development, the 20% match that related to the local dollars, the 5.1 was a $1 million decrease there. So, these changes in funding, how did that affect our operations? We're going to go through these line by line, but your big hitters are of your $4.8 million increase. Transportation has a $7.5 million increase. Community Services has a $3.5 million decrease. So that's a couple of your big hitters, but we'll go through these department by department. So within transportation, you see the $7.5 million increase. Your regional traffic signal program, which they were talking about earlier in their unified work plan, $3.25 million increase. The incident management safety patrol program, $2.75 million increase. And both of those are CMAQ programs, as well as air quality initiatives, a $2.4 million increase there. In workforce development, you see there is a decrease of a whopping $1,000. And you're saying, well, why did we relate anything here? Well, it's because of how the dollars are being used. Child care funding increase of $250,000. WIA Workforce Investment Act, we had a $190,000 decrease, as well as a resource administration grant, a $49,000 decrease there. Within community services, yes.
For the benefit of our legislature and our workforce development, I don't know how familiar you are with our workforce development, but you'll find in just about any of the workforce development groups that over 50% of the money that we get is spent on child care. And we have very little ability to mandate qualifications or minimum requirements for those folks providing. The state is, there are some programs called, I think it's a STAR program. Rising Star programs. There's certain things that they have to do. I truly believe that if we could have more ability to make our child care providers reach minimum standards, that we would also at the same time be curing a lot of the ills that our schools are finding as these pre-kindergarten kids are in child care, and in some instances doing nothing but sitting in front of the TV all day long, as opposed to actually working on colors and numbers and things along that line. So that's something that is a part of our Tarrant County workforce development. It has always kind of been one of my hot buttons, is that we 50% is child care and we can't do anything for child care.
I think this what happens when you out for a while. You come back and everybody's throwing darts, but good darts. But I would like to get with the representative, Mr. I can't recall his name, but he retired, right? Is someone replacing the person who worked with the workforce
Oh, you're
commission?
going Fred.
Fred? Is that him? I
Maybe
can't.
it's that true.
Yeah, did he retire?
Some people think he's retired, but he's.
He retired.
He's on vacation, he's still.
Oh, okay, so he's still with,
Yeah, no, Fred did not have workforce at one of his departments that he supervised. We actually have a director, just not.
it just wasn't, okay.
He is retired.
Based on the number of folks who yelled rising star when I mentioned it, there's some folks right back here.
Okay, well, after the meeting, can we get together and get something we can look into?
There are a lot of folks back
Yeah,
there.
okay, great.
It may be better than David, but, and not taking away from things that these guys really deal with it day in, day out.
Well, we'll get together after the meeting. Thank you, Judge, I appreciate it. Give me another legislative.
All right.
Oh, we got lots.
One other thing on childcare, we're looking at poverty in Dallas. And one of the things that I've been surprised about, and maybe we need to look at here, is I've looked at what our Workforce Solutions Board, we have this huge childcare program, subsidized childcare for people entering the workforce. And I was surprised to look at what companies are utilizing that. And there's a lot of very large companies, not a whole lot of mom and pops and small businesses, but a lot of large multinational companies that are utilizing most of our slots. So maybe we need to think about looking at carving off some of those slots for people who are smaller or mid-sized businesses who actually are based in our area. Because I began to think as I looked at that with the best of intentions, we may have come up with a new corporate welfare scheme in our quest to provide child care. The people that know about how to access that system seem to be the same companies. Something we should think about.
I think it's very good. I do want to remind you that you are the fiscal and administrative agent for the Workforce Board. We have appointees from our counties and from our largest cities that are actually the policy people, but we will definitely put that out, find out where the state and federal laws and regulations fit into all of that, but it's a point that they can certainly look at.
Very good. Community services, the aging has a $264,000 increase. $200,000 of that is basically increase in direct services such as homemaker, respite services, emergency response services, as well as others, and also an increase to the expansion of nursing home relocation program. For the regional 911, again, for the biennium, it's just the dollars were front loaded in 2014. Public safety radio communications program, that was a study that was done in 2014 and completed then. In RIS, we have a $675,000 increase. $360,000 of that is the aerial program. It's an every other year program. We're doing it in 2015. Then we've got the forecasting increase of $130,000 due to the transition of the CDP program, and then GIS support another $125,000 going into that program, which services are used for that throughout the region. Environmental development, as we talked about in the revenues, have changed there from $400,000. The CTP mapping, which Edith went over just a few minutes ago, $477,000 increase. Solid waste regional program, $200,000 increase. And then it's offset by Lake Worth green printing, which we had in last year's budget, which was completed. Emergency preparedness, you have three components. You have the regional mitigation program, you have the Homeland Security program, and then you have CASA. CASA, we've had the startup to that, and so the local and the regional is now decreasing. You have the Homeland Security, we have an increase of $1.1 million under regional mitigation. The Safe Room, $1.5 million increase for that program. But within our regional mitigation strategies, we have a $3 million decrease in that particular grant, which will impact the staffing, as you'll see in just a few moments. Agency administration, increase of $400,000. There's two components. One is the agency administration supports the various departments, one of which is of the $270,000, $185,000 of that is related to transportation. Indirect support, $155,000. A third of that is merit, and then another third of that are interns to support our project management system program. And then operation expenditures for agency management going up $120,000, and that's related to the economic development grant. $60,000 of which that's direct revenue, and $60,000 of that is offset costs. So in total, for operations, we have 322 full-time positions, 43 part-time positions. We have a healthcare increase of 6%, and we have a 3% merit pool. We did reduce 3 full-time positions, one of which was in transportation, and none of these were filled positions. Workforce development, we had a reduction of 2 positions as we recalibrated our staff to meet the changing needs. We had 1 increase to community services, which is the 911 program manager, and then we had a reduction of 2 in emergency preparedness, and then we had an increase of 1 in agency administration for PEBC, the assistant director of PEBC. So that's the net changes there. Now we go to pass-through and in-kind. Pass-through is where we have limited control over the dollars. We are administrative or financial decisions. We don't choose a contractor. We don't do the negotiations, those type of things. But as you know, with all the compliance issues that are going about on a federal and state level, there continues to be responsibilities that we have to do as far as those are concerned, but they're not going to rise to the level that the operating do. So, our change in pass-through expenditures of the $8.7 million, $10 million is in transportation. You have a $1 million increase in community services, and then emergency preparedness of $1.4 million. So, what were those comprised of? Well, in transportation, we had a $4.9 million increase in transit projects, that's FTA projects. Air quality initiatives, $170,000 increase, but you have also your sustainable development projects, a $5.7 million decrease, as those were done in the prior year. You have the Dallas streetcar, decrease of $2 million, HOB operations, another $1.8 million. In workforce development, as we saw in operations, we have some of those changes that actually go through the pass-through. So child care funding went up $1.3 million. WIA, Workforce Investment Act, a $1.6 million decrease. And then DOL went down another $300,000. Community services, you see on aging, as we had our revenues go up some $500,000 for nutrition and support services. Then our in-kind match has also gone up, and for two reasons. One of which is just the increase in revenues, but then also last year we planned for a decrease in revenues. They were able to hold the services constant with our contractors out in the field, and so that increased their in-kind. 911 planning, that's the $492,000 decrease. That's the NCTCOG, that's the regional 911 system. Again, this was a biennium funding plan for, there's not a reduction in funding per se. E&D, you got pass-through expenditure decrease of $100,000 due to the 408 permitting expediting, which was done in the previous year. And then emergency preparedness and safe room rebate program, the in-kind of some $1.4 million. So in total, your operations changed $4.8 million increase. Your pass-through went down $8.7 million for a total change of $3.8 million. I would ask Chairman Scarves or any other committee members, if they would like to comment on any of the information that we presented to this morning.
Well, just firstly, appreciate the time and effort that you put into explaining that. I told them I'm a little bit slow, so by the time we've done this, I'll see it 3 times, but it may take that, But we did have several questions, and obviously we're able to delve in that a little bit deeper than we can in this setting, and I think it met all of our expectations. Unless we have further questions, I would.
I'll second the motion. I want to commend Monte as usual and his staff for an exceptional job. God makes people who like to do this stuff. I'm not one of them, and so I'm very glad there are people like Monte.
And I take back my motion. This is just informational.
Yeah, we're not really seeking a motion today. This is information item, but I appreciate the affirmation today that we're heading in the right direction. Yeah, thank God that he didn't make too many of them. Our conversations would be very different from what they are today.
Monty, refresh my memory, because in what Pete's question was, in the agency administration as far as our full-time employees.
Yes.
I know we hired our assistant director at PBC, and I know we have probably, I think we have five employees. For an agency like that, where it's totally underwritten by the members of that group, y'all, we just reimburse y'all for all of those costs. How many more agencies, I see 40 people listed there. Are all of those people under that type of arrangement?
No. Under that 40, we have human resources, we have audit, we have purchasing, we have budget, we have accounts payable, accounts receivable.
And that's what I would have expected. I would have expected those to be people who were, so it surprised me when I heard PBC, because that's really a separate entity that is separate and apart from kind of, okay, we've got all these costs that we've got to spread out amongst all of our grants, and they're kind of the administration part of our deal.
That's a good point. We, as you know, they started small and they've grown over the years, and we've always just left that in there as a placeholder, but we can certainly break that out.
Well, yeah, I don't think it makes any. It didn't make any difference. When I saw that, I thought, okay, wait a minute. Do we have 40 other? I knew how many we had in PBC. I didn't know whether or not that was
we had
truly a
similar entities that we were staffing on behalf of somebody who really paid full bill for our.
Well, yeah, like I know that, I think there's the electrical, is the electric school run out of here? Okay.
But we do run like the ERP for Arlington, Grand Prairie, Carrollton. We do run that, but we have contracts that we run through there, and so we don't actually have the personnel for something like that.
So you actually manage, you have the contract to provide the administrative management for that, whereas PEBC takes their folks and divides that out among their participants. But we actually have people who are doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah, when Dallas and Tarrant County first asked if we would do this, I agreed that they wanted a second party or a third party to be the administrator. They wanted us to be the employer of their administrative people, so they are truly our employees.
Right. I knew they were because they're not in our insurance plan.
Exactly. And, yeah, they're in ours. And of course, it's grown. There are several other entities from that. But that's the only one we have that we're operating on behalf of some others that actually have employees.
Yes.
Before we move on, I do want to take the opportunity to recognize the great staff that has worked on this. Calling your name, I want you to stand up. Randy Richardson, Richard Michael, Shannon Ramirez, Maggie Lira, Molly Rendon, Tony Price. I want those guys thank. I really appreciate all the work that you guys did on this. Did a great job. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention the great job that Dan Kessler and his team, there's a lot of transportation numbers in here. They put all these things together and they pass these things forward. And Dan did a great job of organizing that and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to tell you, as Paul Harvey would, the rest of the story. The real true story there is actually Stephanie Mullins did all the work. So Dan Kessler doesn't deserve any of this credit. But Stephanie Mullins did a fantastic job. I want to tell you, this was the best put together, least amount of questions that we had to ask during the process. I was very pleased. And the second part of it is when we were in the Finance Committee meeting, we had a few questions that we had to answer. And so Molly Rendon's sitting at the end of the table down there, and so we had the question, and Molly's down there texting and all that kind of stuff, and Stephanie's answering it back and all that kind of stuff. But we were able to get them all answered within the context of the meeting. And that's a real credit to everyone's work. And so I appreciate the teamwork that it took to pull this off and get this done.
Thank you, Monty, and I see we're going to, it'll be up for adoption at the next board meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep. Thank you very much. Thanks for the information. If anybody else has any questions, they can call Monty later.
All right.
Thank you. The Homeland Security Grant Program Closeout Project, Molly?
Yes.
Molly's on vacation.
Oh.
Molly's gained a little bit of weight.
Okay, well, I believe it'd be Monty.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Molly's on vacation, and so she sends her regards, but this is the update that you had in your packet. In July 14, we had funding awarded to COG for the BTC Regional Video Conferencing Program. It funded eight of these cameras, video conferencing capabilities. Then in late July, we were awarded another $6 million. $6 million. I wish it was $6 million. Don't you guys? Yeah, that'd be great. Yes, for the city of Dallas. And so the region now has 9 new BTC units to support EOC communications. COG will actually retain 1. Obviously, Dallas is going to get 1, and then they're going to go through a process to determine who will be eligible and who these are going to be distributed to. It's great work by the EP staff. We have them here. If you have any questions, then if you have any difficulty, well, then we have the EP staff that can actually answer the questions. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions or have your answers or have your questions answered.
Is this a standalone system, or does it connect with other BTC systems that are already out there?
Go ahead.
They'll connect with any of the BTCs that are out there. Their Life Size is the brand, but they'll connect with Polycom or any of the other BTC units that we use.
These were UASI funds?
The $6 million, you got me saying million.
Yeah, that's right.
Like $6,500 of it was UASI, and which came back from the city of Dallas that they couldn't spend before their grant closeout. And then the other $49,000 and change was from SHSP, an additional award that we received for part of the grant closeout funds for the state.
And those were the SWEP funds that were available, and we actually submitted for those and were able to obtain those.
Thank you. All right. Are there any, Judge? Any other comments, questions? Okay, thank you. Mr. Monte?
Yes, I just want to let you know that I have accepted a seat on a committee that is looking at the electricity market and how it can be used more efficiently and more effectively. I passed out restricted to you, I really didn't pass out. Other members, and I don't think I've got to you, that are on here, I do that just to show it is a pretty high-level committee, but it is also made up of a wide range of interest in electricity. What it's really looking at is overall, how can we reduce demand on the system, but particularly, how can we reduce peak demand? Much as we look at water, that we have peak demand that is very, very high compared to what our average daily use is 9 or 10 months out of the year. So doing that through conservation, through energy efficiency, and then also looking at how through smart meters, through other types of activities that we can shift demand to different times of the day and are priced appropriately according to what the demand is. This is just a committee that has no legal standing, but could make recommendations back to the legislature. I got selected not just for me, though I do know many of the people on here, but because of what we've done with our codes, with our solar activities, with all the things that we're looking at as a COG with our local entities of putting into place. What Edith was just talking about with the electrical code committee, we are really encouraging all of our cities to adopt these regional codes because of the appliances that are in the type of insulation that's used, and it is really beginning to show a sharp decrease in the electricity demand out of our homes. It's tougher to go back and retrofit, but there are programs where there's some monies available to accomplish that is actually the Encores of the world have responsibility for their energy. When they broke up the independently operated utilities into power generation, the retail electric providers, and then the transmission and distribution companies, you lost some of the synergy that you had for the energy modes. The city of Boston, because they are a municipal electricity provider, they can actually deal with the customer directly on, here are some things we have in place that you can use to save electricity consumption. Here are some grants we have available for you to reduce your demand for electricity. But it's specifically stated in the Texas law that Encore and other distribution and transmission companies cannot have very much contact with the customer. And the retail electric providers, who are the folks that buy from the power companies and then resell back to the retail market, are really get their money off of a volumetric approach. So the more electricity that can be sold, the more dollars they can bring in, so they have no incentive to really get the word out to us as homeowners or as building owners of programs that might help us to lower the demand of electricity. I was also, I mentioned the fact when we were introducing ourselves that I was here not only for what it meant for the region, but looking out for our kids and grandkids where we do have electricity. And I said, I already know that we're leaving billions of dollars of cost on them for what we're not taking care of as cities under the ground and on the ground and above the ground. And the guy that followed me, it happened to be the senior vice president of the Encore of the Houston area, and he said, let me say what he's saying. We've got a tremendous amount of our distribution system and a lot of our transmission system that also needs to be replaced. So the less cost that we have for producing electricity, the more ability we have to go and take care of that infrastructure, and hopefully the less cost it will be on all of us in the future, but having an adequate, reliable supply of electricity. So I think it is a very serious commitment that we have to at least explore this, see where it can go, how we can get the three entities involved in from power generation to the final consumption by us as energy users, really working in concert to figure out limited resources, how to best utilize them and maintain reliability out into the future. But the other part of it was, and the real reason I want to bring it to you was, when we talk about energy codes, when we talk about solar and wind, and we talk about all of these issues that we're doing with our cities on a voluntary basis with them, it really does count into the overall picture. And the folks who are on this committee think it's a great effort that we have produced over the past, and what our board has encouraged us to do and allowed us to do, and it really does count for something.
It really does, and you're right, it's protecting the future. So we appreciate you doing it, giving your time to work on that, and you'll keep us posted on
I
that.
will.
Okay, good. Well, we have finished that, we're down to miscellaneous, and do we have any old or new business? Would anyone like to propose any future agenda items? Then, we are adjourned.